Hello there. Today, we're going to be starting on the second page of the intrapersonal notes. So if you look at the email that I sent, I think it was 2 days ago, you'll see that's going to be labeled day 11. And I want to talk a little bit about that. Even if we end up missing some days to let you catch up time, like we did yesterday, or for a different reason, we're going to pick up on the next day as it's labeled, as if no break ever existed. For instance, this Friday is Good Friday, and we were originally scheduled to not have school on Good Friday. So guess what? I'm not going to have you do any schoolwork either. It just doesn't seem fair. So that means that today we are going to start on day 11 of the packet that I emailed you, which is the same packet that I sent out. You don't have to pick up a new packet. And tomorrow we're going to do day 12. So today is day 11, tomorrow's day 12. Friday is going to be Good Friday, so we skip that day. When we pick back up on Monday, that means that would be day 13, which is actually a quiz. And so there also will not be any video on Monday. I'll send out a remind, and I'll also send out an email because some of you are not getting those reminds, and I didn't know that until yesterday. Before we get into today's notes, I want to go ahead and just talk about the alternative assignment. This alternative assignment will cover days 11 through 13. So I will not talk about alternative assignments anymore this week, all the way up until next Tuesday when we start a new batch of alternative assignments. So I'm going to assign it today, and then you have until Monday to finish it and get me a copy, all right? So we are going to take all the alternative assignments that you've done so far, and we're going to put them all together into a video. So that means you need to include a couple of things. Number one, that includes your own personal thoughts about COVID-19 and how this change has impacted you. You can use either a videotape of yourself, or you can make like a collage of the words that you've come up with, or like scrolling text, however you want. It's your video. Number two, this includes the videos that you made of your two friends and your family members. It also needs to include the video breakdown of your position papers on the 2 news articles, and also the hashtag that I told you way back, like a week and a half ago, that you needed to come up with in order to use. And so your job is to edit these together into a relatively short video that explains what we currently know, how we feel, and what gives us hope, while also incorporating your hashtag. I don't want this video to be much longer than 6 minutes. You can upload it onto YouTube. You can keep it private if you want and just send me a link. However, if you open it up and you can get at least 20 likes and 20 shares, then I'm going to give you bonus. I don't really know how I'm going to do that yet. If we end up having a final, maybe I can stick it onto the final. But I will get you some bonus points, even if it's just, that you get a free day sometime in the next couple of weeks. All right, so let's go ahead and get to that worksheet. So the worksheet is going to actually look at the very top. It starts off with number 3, because remember, 2 days ago, on Monday, we did the parts 1 and 2 of this worksheet. And so we're talking about perception and what types of perception and our understanding of reality. And it becomes our basis of judgments and for the decisions that we make. It also determines the appropriateness of your communication choices. And so this is going to be personal perception, how you personally perceive a situation to be, based on your relationship, based on the place when it's occurring, and based on what you're talking about. And so all those variables can change. And so, to talk about some of those variables, next it talks about factors that influence personal perception. The very first one is that something that reflects your priorities and what you think is important. And so, one of the things that we talked about in class was that we have this sense of ethics, the sense of right and wrong. And so the things that you value reflect your priorities. And so the answers, values, reflect your priorities and what you think is important. Some people value family, some people value friends, some people value their health, some people value their freedom. We see a bunch of these different values in conflict today. The next thing that we're talking about is what one believes to be true that often helps you to decide what to accept or reject. And so obviously that's going to be beliefs, right? Some of us have personal beliefs in a higher power. Some of us have beliefs in like the ability of humans to overcome all things. Some of us have beliefs in ourselves. And some of us don't have any beliefs that are, that can be categorized as any of those things. But it allows us to accept, to decide what to accept and reject if they fall within our set pattern of beliefs. The next is going to talk about family, community, organizations in which you belong. And so when you think about it, A lot of us belong to different cultures. So there's an American culture, but there's also subsets of cultures inside of the American culture. And so I'm half Mexican, so I belong in that subset of like Hispanic speakers or of Mexican Americans. And so that's a culture. And with it comes different types of food, different types of beliefs, different types of customs, the different ways that you treat each other, and it's going to change a bunch of the communication decisions that you make. The same thing if you come from like a country culture. A lot of people here tend to have that country culture. And it's a little bit more kind, a little bit more friendly, a little bit more want to help out people that they don't know, unlike for instance the culture of like city culture, where they're a little bit more distant and a little less likely to take interest in each other. Next is a bias, is your consistent attitude, viewpoint, or pattern of perception. And so our bias can impact how we see other things. And we already talked about that when we talked about stereotyping earlier in the year. Preconceived judgment, or when you prejudge others on opinions rather than facts, is known as prejudice. And so prejudice can occur in many different ways. One of the stereotypes that we talked about before was, when people look at athletes as kind of just big ogres, that's prejudice, because a lot of my best students ever have been athletes, and a lot of the people who are the most respectful and the nicest are athletes. But whenever you see this prejudice on the television or on movies, you see that they're usually rude, crude, and kind of dumb, but that's just not the case. So it's a preconceived judgment that impacts how we think about other people, and we kind of need to rethink those things. Our attitudes, power influences that can be positive or negative. And so your own personal attitude can influence how you're going to perceive other things that are happening in your communication sphere. Next is expectations, is basing a judgment on what is expected rather than what actually happened. And so sometimes we go into things like maybe our birthday and we have an expectation of something big, fantastic happening. And instead, it's subdued. And so it's a good birthday, but it's not what you expected. And so the way that you perceive that birthday is going to be a lot different than if you had got exactly what you'd wanted. And so we need to tailor our expectations to allow us to really perceive what's happening around us, instead of to just be mad if our expectations are not met, or happy if they are. We need to be a little bit more flexible. Next is, it talks about how what you know influences how you organize and interpret information. And of course, this is going to go into knowledge. So your knowledge base allows you to perceive the world in a much different manner. And so if you would go back tens of thousands of years, they didn't have a working knowledge of science. They didn't have a working knowledge of the way that the galaxy worked. And so they might look at something such as a mass disease outbreak as being like a punishment from the gods, a punishment from on high. And instead, now we know, based on our knowledge, that it's actually just a viral outbreak that is unfortunately hurting people. And so it allows us to place our beliefs in proper context. And so knowledge is very important. Next is communication skills. If lacking in the part of the communication process may have difficulty in understanding and being understood. And so if you have a stutter, if you are one of those people in our class, like we have a couple who don't speak very loud, who are very, very timid, that's going to impact your ability to process the communication that's occurring. Next, analyzing our perceptions. So why do these things matter? Two people in the same room can have completely different perceptions of the same event. I know that we all have seen this happen. You see someone have a conversation, and then one takes it positive and one takes it negative. So these varying perceptions can cause conflict and misunderstandings. We've talked about this a whole lot in terms of like the problems that we have when we're texting people. To overcome this, you must continually check your own perceptions and make sure that they're accurate based on the reality of the situation in which they occurred. The way that you can do this is, first, never assume that what you perceive as the truth is the actual absolute truth. You always have to assume that what you perceive is possibly wrong, and then fact check that against reality. And so a lot of us just assume, well, if I perceive it as truth, it's got to be truth. and that's not the case. So an intrapersonal perception check is going to go back on the things that we talked about. You need to question your sensory perception, you need to question your selective perception, and your personal perception. And so when you look back over those things, you see what the problem is in terms of how you are perceiving reality to be. And then finally, you have interpersonal perception check. So you need to clarify your perception of others' messages. So you can do that interpersonally by asking them, what did you mean when you said X? Or what did you mean when you texted that message? You can also analyze other people's points of views and see, are they having a difficulty? Are they having a personal problem? Is there some reason why they might have said that? And then finally, you need to take responsibility for your own communication. And so it's important that you look back at what you said and then take personal ownership of those things and how they might have impacted other people. All right, that's it for today's notes. I miss you guys so much. Have a wonderful day.